Since I hiked the 100-mile wilderness last July, a number of friends and family members have asked me questions about the hike, and I wanted to take the time today to respond to those questions. First off, what is it? What is the 100-mile wilderness? It's the most remote section of the Appalachian Trail. So the 2,000-mile trail that goes from Georgia to Maine, the 100-mile wilderness is the most remote section of that whole trail. It's also the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail, right before Baxter State Park and Katahdin. The 100-mile wilderness is super beautiful, and it's got some technical and difficult stretches as well. So you put that all together, the Appalachian Trail, the remoteness, the beauty, the difficulty, and you get an iconic world-famous trail. Is there a preferred way to do this trail, northbound or southbound? The preference is ultimately up to you, but I can say that the vast majority of people do head north on the Appalachian Trail from Monson to Baxter State Park. A minority of people do go southbound, and so there's a countercultural element to heading south. If you want to go with the pack, if that's what makes you comfortable, then heading north is the way to go. If you want to set yourself apart and give yourself a little bit of an extra challenge, you can head south. How did you prepare as a first timer? So when I did the 100-mile wilderness, it was my first multi-night trip. I had done day hikes before, and I had spent single nights on trips before, but I had never spent multiple nights on a single camping trip before. That being the case, I knew that I needed to kind of front load my preparation with a lot of information and a lot of training and a lot of simulating the essential elements that a successful hike would require. So the information piece, the learning piece, I started with maps, studying trip reports, talking to people who had done it before. And by the time that it came to actually doing the hike, I felt like I had a pretty good sense of the trail, the line it took, the terrain it covered, the various river crossings, where I could sleep, where we could have pre-arranged food drops. So I knew a lot going into it, and the information was definitely an asset for me. As far as training, I thought the better physical condition I can get myself in, the better. So I didn't always have the opportunity to go out and do hikes, especially multi-day hikes. But what I did is simulate the pack weight by just putting sand in a backpack and then running around the neighborhood. And over a 3-month period of time, I started this with a 5-pound backpack, just going for casual walks. And then over the 3 months, I built up the weight in the backpack. I built up the intensity. So by the end of it, I was finding hills in my neighborhood and running up and down those hills with a 40-pound backpack, feeling really comfortable in the process. And, from training and the information collecting, I would also look at what are the essential skills to a successful hike. And then I would reflect, where am I the weakest? So out of everything that's required of me on this multi-day hike, where am I weakest? And therefore, where do I need to focus my attention and develop that skill? At one point, I identified that my knot tying needed to improve because I noticed a lot of inconsistencies with how I was tying knots, and that was making my tarp setup time to be half an hour. It was just taking me way too long to set up my tarp that I need to sleep in at night. So I just drilled knot tying over and over and over, getting to the point where I felt like I could do it during the day or at night, in the rain or when it's dry, from different perspectives, starting the knot from different angles and getting that so that wasn't a stressor. The more things that you can get comfortable with and eliminate stress, just the more clear your head is going to be, the more fun you're going to have. At another point, I identified a weakness of being able to sleep outside. Just if you have not slept in the woods at night alone before, that can be a big stressor. So I started in the backyard in a tent and then moved to a tarp in the backyard and then cowboy camping in my backyard. And then that progressed to finding some woods within a few miles of my house and doing the same back there. So always spending a single night at a time outside, but being more progressive with the level of exposure and just making sure that those reps, so to speak, were translating to my own comfort level. So that would be a recommendation to you to say, list out what you think you are going to need to do to make this hike a success, and just work on your weaknesses and make as many things as possible comfortable for yourself. What was your daily mileage and how did you pace your hike? My daily mileage was 16 and a half miles. I went into this hike wanting to do 25 to 30 miles a day. And in my experience with single day hikes, that was a totally plausible goal, at least for a single day hike. Once I got into day 2, day 3, I realized the gravity of this 100-mile hike, and I realized the risk that's associated with it. And due to the risk that I recognized halfway through, I really brought my pace down. My focus at that point was, let's finish, and let's finish safely. And then speed is a secondary consideration. I learned the value of being flexible with my plans and with my pace. I can say that even doing 16 miles a day, even though that's not 25 or 30 miles a day, it still felt like I was flying. That 16 miles a day still felt really fast. How do you avoid getting lost? First off, the Appalachian Trail and the 100-mile wilderness, it's like a highway in the trail world. It's a wide trail, it's a very well-established trail, a well-marked trail. So it's going to be relatively harder to get lost. That said, you don't want to get complacent, and you want your focus here to be on staying found. How do you stay found? And what that boils down to is keeping your body in check, not getting too overworked, not allowing your heart rate to get too high, and that's going to allow you to think clearly. And when you're thinking clearly, you can note the topography. What are the hills doing in front of you and around you? What's the sun doing in the sky? What are the clouds doing? You can find prominent trees and rock formations and constantly orient yourself relative to these items, so that if you do get turned around, if you do get off trail and lost to a degree, you can reorient yourself and find yourself quickly based on these prior landmarks, whether they be on the earth or in the sky. You can reorient yourself and stay found. As well marked as the trail is, it's still important to have a paper map and even a digital map on your phone. I used a map called Guthook on my phone. Funny name, great app. I also had a satellite communicator, the Garmin InReach Mini. It's an expensive item, but it provides a lot of peace of mind, and it allowed me to stay in contact with Brianna via text message all throughout the hike, and I really appreciated that. The Garmin InReach Mini and other satellite communicators, they've saved a lot of lives. Totally worth the price. What's it like to hike solo? There are pros and cons. One of the pros is that you can always control the pace. You can figure out how fast or slow you want to go in any given moment, and that can be really nice. The downside of hiking alone is that it can test your resolve. There's something profoundly challenging about sleeping in the woods alone at night. Hiking is always social though. There are a lot of people on trail, and you do have opportunities to spend time with them, and it's really up to you how social you want to be. Personally, I really enjoyed the company of other people on trail. I had a lot of great conversations. There's an old Thoreau line from the 1850s. He says, "You're likely to meet a worldly person in the wilderness of Maine." I found that to be true. There's a lot of great people on the trail. Everyone's got a story, and everyone's got something to add. How do you deal with bad weather? For this question, I'm reminded of something that my friend Sean told me. He said, the fundamental question in hiking is, how many days can you wake up wet and keep going? On day 2, it rained all day. It wasn't supposed to rain, but it did. It rained all day. I went to bed wet. I woke up the next morning in the lean-to and had to put on wet clothes in the morning and just keep going. I was sharing this lean-to with 2 people, a guy named Snack Pack and a woman named Cashmere. And Cashmere was a triple crowner. So at this point, she had already done 8,000 miles of hiking. And I asked her in the morning, as everyone's putting on their wet hiking clothes from the day before, I asked her, what's your secret for putting on wet clothing in the morning? What do you do in this situation? And she just said, there's no secret. You just put on your wet clothes. It always feels horrible. You just do it and you keep going. What did you bring that you didn't need? And what didn't you bring that you wish you had? As far as items that I brought and didn't need, there weren't any of those. This was my backpack. It's the Z-Pax Nero. It's a 38-liter backpack. And this is considered a really small backpack for the 100-mile wilderness. By choosing to use a smaller backpack, I made sure that everything I put in it was absolutely necessary. And ultimately, I had everything I needed, and my pack weight was a whole lot lower, and my backpack was easier to maneuver. I really liked having the lower pack weight, so I would recommend putting some work in, some preparation and some testing in advance to figure out what are the items that you really need rather than the items you think you need. As far as items that I didn't bring and wish I had, pants. I didn't bring a pair of pants, so I was so minimalist in the gear that I thought I could get away without pants. I had a pair of shorts and I had a pair of underwear for sleeping at night, and I thought I'm just gonna hike all day and then I'm gonna sleep at night. I don't need any clothing for the transitions. And I was totally wrong about that. I definitely needed a pair of pants. As luck would have it, on night 2, the lean-to that I stayed at had a pair of pants, and the pair of pants fit me. It was unbelievable. And I wore those pants at some point every day for the rest of that hike, up until the final day where I took them out of my pack, I folded them neatly, and I left them at the last lean-to that I came across on trail for the next person to appreciate. What did you eat? So I did something called cold soaking, which is in contrast to eating cooked food or warmed food. So I didn't have a stove, and this was great because I didn't have to carry a stove or fuel, and I didn't have to take the time to cook my food. I did what's called cold soaking, where you take some food and you put it in a container. This is a shake bottle, and you just let it sit there for 30 minutes to an hour. And at the end of that time, it's ready to eat. As far as the actual food that I put in there, this is an example of one meal. So what you're looking at is dehydrated pinto beans, and then there's some spices in there too, just to give it some flavor and to make it feel like it's warm. In my experience, I didn't miss warm food. Whatever I was eating on trail, it felt natural and enjoyable. And this is about 600 calories, so a good dinner portion there. In the morning, I would have, it's also dehydrated, and it's oatmeal with blueberries. And again, you just put those in the bottle with some water, let it sit for 30 minutes to 60 minutes. It's ready to eat. In my experience, it's a lot faster and cheaper and lighter weight than eating cooked food. It's definitely something reserved for more hardcore hikers. Most of the people you meet on trail will be cooking their food, but you might want to give cold soaking a try. It's not bad. No one asked about this, but I will offer you this. The 100-mile wilderness is a pilgrimage. You can walk into the forest one person and walk out a different person. Think about the direction your life's taken, who you are and who you want to be. Set an intention for your hike. You might just walk out of that woods a different person. The greatest opportunity of the 100-mile wilderness is that it's a pilgrimage.